I am a former paramedic, and I responded once with police and fire to a report of a man down the side of the railroad tracks in a wooded area approximately 500 yards from the nearest access road. A railroad employee riding the tracks doing a safety check noticed the man down the embankment. We parked and walked with all the equipment the 500 or so yards to where the patient was. He had no signs of life, flat line on the EKG, along with fixed and dilated pupils. Doing a little more checking, he had no visible signs of any type of trauma. The body was not cold yet, and there wasn't any rigor mortis, so he hadn't been dead for too long. We didn't see any track marks where he would have shot up and overdosed, and feel no broken bones. The guy with the railroad said a train hadn't passed in the last 8 hours. We searched the area and find a makeshift tent campsite where the guy apparently was living. We don't find any medications or anything out of the ordinary. We're not too far from an area that everyone believes is haunted and satanic worshipping takes place. Even though all of us on the scene knew about the rumors, none of us had actually seen anything or had any proof. It's dark, and we were all waiting around for a funeral home to show up and bring the body to the morgue for an autopsy. Then some weird and spooky stuff started happening. A few of us heard what sounded like people whispering, but it wasn't from any specific direction. A couple of the guys didn't hear it and thought we were trying to mess with them. Then the whispering noises stopped, and the people who were there that hadn't heard the whispering started hearing what they all described as children laughing wickedly. But it was all over, not from any specific direction. Those of us that had heard the whispering never heard the new noise. This went on for about 10 to 15 minutes while we're all standing next to the corpse. Police officers on the scene told the dispatcher to tell the funeral home to step it up and get out here ASAP. We helped them load the body, didn't even bother strapping it down, and got the hell out of there. The next afternoon, we went to the morgue to speak with the coroner and find out the cause of death. The first thing the coroner asked us was why did we clean the body? Me and my partner looked at him kinda strange and asked what was he talking about. He said it must have been a very bloody scene, but we told him there was no blood anywhere. He then turned pale and said that just added to the confusion because the body had absolutely no blood in it whatsoever. There were no marks anywhere on him where blood could have been drained out. He also said he had a weird experience while doing the autopsy, but refused to tell us what happened. To this day, we have still never learned the actual cause of death, or been able to explain the whispering and evil laughing. I worked as a police officer in a small town in rural Nebraska. Back in the 90s, I was patrolling through town in winter. We hit several abandoned houses in town, but one seemed to have drawn the attraction of copper thieves, so we were told to keep an eye on it. I drove by it around 7 p.m. Since it sat on a corner lot, I had a clear view of all four sides of the house. As I drove around the corner, nothing looks out of the ordinary. About 2 hours later, I drive by it again, and the back door, it's wide open. I know that the back door was not open when I drove by it earlier. Looking at the snow on the ground and around the house, there were no footprints. So I think, what the hell? I call dispatch and tell them I'm investigating an open door at that address. I walk to the open door, pull out my flashlight and shine it inside. The house has obviously been gutted for the most part. The plaster walls have been torn down, debris piles everywhere. Since there were no footsteps in the snow around the door other than mine, and with all the dust on the floor not showing footprints, I chalk it up to the wind, or maybe the door just opened on its own. I was about to secure the door when I heard a loud thump come from upstairs, and what sounded like kids laughing. So I enter the house and yell out, "Police department, come downstairs." More of what sounded like kids playing. I tell dispatch that it sounds like there are kids in the house, and start making my way through the kitchen into the living room where the stairs are. All the while, cautiously checking the main floor. 2 more times, I hear something upstairs, but since I've had no response, I start thinking maybe it's an animal. Still, I hear what I'd swear was kids laughing. I head upstairs and it all gets quiet. The upstairs is relatively small, with a hallway at the top of the stairs that has one bedroom on the right, one straight ahead at the end of the hall, and a bedroom on the left. As I get to the top of the stairs, I hear a thump in the bedroom to the left. I carefully peek around the door, and it's an empty room with a small pile of plaster and wood debris in the middle. Sitting on top of the pile of debris was a page torn out of a children's book with a picture of a police officer on it. The hair stood up on the back of my neck. I got out of that room, quickly cleared the other rooms upstairs, and got the hell out of there. Told dispatch nobody was in the house, locked the back door, and never went back in there again. I was going on a date with a woman I'd met recently. We arranged a time and a place to meet and discussed what to do on our first date. She said, "I'll rent a movie, order a pizza, and we can just hang out at my house." Since she lived out in the country and her house would be difficult to find, we meet up at a gas station so I could follow her to her place. When we arrived at her place, I noticed she lived alone in the house. I asked her if she had roommates. She told me she was a teacher and recently bought the house. I didn't think much of it. That sounded pretty legit to me. Once inside, we sat down, started the movie and chowed down on some pizza. Later on, we decided to cuddle on the couch. Then we started making out, and it went from the couch to her bed. As we were laying on the bed facing each other, looking into one another's eyes, I saw something standing in the doorway of her bedroom out of the corner of my eye. I turned my head to look, and when I saw what was standing there, I was paralyzed with fear. It was the blackest, darkest shadow I had ever seen. It looked like someone was wearing a cloak with a hood up over its head, like the Grim Reaper. It took 2 slow steps, walking across the doorway until it disappeared behind the wall. I jumped up, as did she when she saw me jump. I whispered in a panicked voice, "There's someone in the house." At this point in my life, I was a police officer. I knew what I'd seen, but logic told me it was an intruder. So I looked around her bedroom for anything I could use as a weapon. She had a huge candle in a glass jar on her nightstand. I picked it up and thought, I'll smash this over their head. Together, she and I searched her house from top to bottom and didn't find anyone. Once we finished searching the house, a feeling of dread and terror hit me like a ton of bricks, because at that moment, I realized what I'd seen. I described it to her. Then she started crying and accused me of not liking her and making up shit so I could leave. I thought, are you kidding me? Then, it's like that little voice in my head was telling me, get out now, get out. I told her to pack a bag and stay with a friend or come with me, but I wasn't staying another second in that house. I grabbed all my stuff, rushed out the door, jumped in my car, and got the heck out of there. I don't think I've ever pulled out of a driveway so fast in my life. I was speeding and didn't slow down until I was 3 blocks from my house. About a month later, I received a message from her on Facebook. She told me that she believed my story now, and said since that night weird things began to happen in her house. I asked her what had happened. She told me that at night she could hear pots and pans rattling in her kitchen. Doors would open on her own. Footsteps. And the television would turn off by itself. My uncle was the sheriff of a small town in New Mexico. He was the most hardcore person in our family, super straight-laced, never really BS'd, and wasn't at all a joker. So when he told this story, we all believed it without question. A local reporter named Bob D. would always show up at any major police activity from the police scanner. Big car wrecks, fires, anything worth maybe reporting in the local paper. Everyone on the force knew Bob D. He was around at least once or twice a week at various police activities. Bob was a bit of a joker himself. He would mess with people by flicking behind their ears. People would react to the flicks, thinking it was a bug, only to turn around and see it was Bob jerking around. Everyone liked Bob. Unfortunately, Bob had bad lung cancer and died pretty suddenly. His wife buried him. For the next couple of weeks after his funeral, people kept talking about seeing Bob at car wrecks, fires, all the same stuff he used to report on. There were 20 to 30 reports like this from civilians and members of the force. My uncle, he didn't buy it. until the night he and my aunt showed up at our house, gun drawn, pale as paper. We asked him what the hell happened, and he had to sit down, take his breath, compose himself, and start to outline what happened. He said my aunt and him were sitting on the couch in their house watching TV. My uncle kept scratching at his ear over and over. Finally, my aunt asked him what the problem was, and he turned around just in time to see their bedroom door open. Bob D was standing in the doorway, clear as day. My uncle jumped up, cussed or something, got my aunt's attention, who turned to see him there too. As soon as they both made eye contact with him, Bob smiled, turned, walked across the living room and out their front door, closing the door behind himself, and he was gone. My uncle got control of himself and ran outside, gun drawn, looking for Bob, but he was gone. At that point, they ran over to our place. We went over there and didn't see anything, but my aunt and uncle stayed at our place that night. At work the next day, all the guys in the force were giving my uncle lots of "we told you so." People around town said they saw Bob D show up at police scenes for at least another 2 to 3 months. My dad saw him in our darkroom in our basement with a friend. He was flicking their ears in the dark. During the 3rd month, people that saw him kept saying he was looking worse and worse. My uncle saw him 2 more times, each time confirming he looked more and more worn. My dad had concluded that he was decomposing, and his ghost was reflecting that process. Every time my ear itches, I get goosebumps. My uncle works for dispatch in my town, and he recently told my family of the weirdest call he's ever gotten. He said that he had received a call from a landline one night, and when he answered it, there was only static on the other end. This happened 2 more times. Finally, he calls a squad to go check the address from the caller ID. When the cops got there and walked into the house, they immediately saw that there was a dead body. The person had been dead for 5 months. The craziest part about it was that there was no electricity or any other utility working. So there is no way they should have been able to get those calls into dispatch.